Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the 8th of 11 children, was born in Johnston, New York, to Daniel Cady and Margaret Livingston Cady. 5 of her siblings died in early childhood or infancy. Only Elizabeth Cady and her 4 sisters lived well into adulthood and old age. Daniel Cady was Stanton's father. He was a prominent Federalist attorney who served 1 term in the United States Congress. Judge Cady introduced his daughter to the law and, together with her brother-in-law, Edward Bayard, planted the early seeds that grew into her legal and social activism. Even as a young girl, she enjoyed perusing her father's law library and debating legal issues with his law clerks. It was this early exposure to law that, in part, caused Stanton to realize how disproportionately the law favored men over women, particularly over married women. Her realization that married women had virtually no property, income, employment, or even custody rights over their own children helped set her course toward changing these inequities. Unlike many women of her era, Stanton was formally educated. She attended Johnston Academy, where she studied Latin, Greek, mathematics, religion, science, French, and writing until the age of 16. At the academy, she enjoyed being in coeducational classes where she could compete intellectually and academically with boys her age and older. She did this very successfully, winning several academic awards and honors, including the award for Greek language. In her memoir, 80 Years and More, Stanton credits the Cady's neighbor, Reverend Simon Hosack, with strongly encouraging her intellectual development and academic abilities at a time when she felt these were undervalued by her father. When she wrote about her brother Eleazar's death in 1826, Stanton remembers trying to comfort her father, saying that she would try to be all her brother had been. At the time, her father's response devastated Stanton. "Oh, my daughter, I wish she were a boy." Understanding from this that her father valued boys above girls, Stanton tearfully took her disappointment to Reverend Hosack, whose firm belief in her abilities counteracted her father's perceived disparagement. Hosack went on to teach Stanton Greek, encouraged her to read widely, and ultimately bequeathed to her his own Greek lexicon along with other books. His confirmation of her intellectual ability strengthened Stanton's confidence and self-esteem. Upon graduation from Johnston Academy, Stanton received one of her first tastes of sexual discrimination. Stanton watched with dismay as the young men graduating with her, many of whom she had surpassed academically, went on to Union College. With Union College taking only men at the time, Stanton enrolled in the Troy Female Seminary in Troy, New York. This was one of the events in Stanton's early life that influenced her to become a female rights activist.
It was a tiny ad placed in an obscure newspaper, the Seneca County Courier, a weekly paper delivered to farms in the cold country where New York State meets Canada, ran just 3 sentences in its edition of July 14, 1848. The simple announcement invited women to a discussion of the social, civil, and religious rights of women. Little did anyone know that 5 days later at the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls, New York, almost 200 women would show up for the first ever Women's Right Convention. The first of the 2-day convention was only for women, while the second was open to the public. Elizabeth Cady Stanton read her Declaration of Sentiments and Grievances, a treaty of sorts that she had drafted over the previous few days. This declaration closely followed America's Declaration of Independence, with a preamble featuring this proclamation. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights." The Declaration of Sentiments and Grievances went on to detail the injustices inflicted upon women in the United States and called upon women to organize and petition for their rights. On the second day of the convention, men were invited to attend, and some did. Among those 40 men that attended were Frederick Douglass. On this day, the Declaration of Sentiments and Grievances was adopted and signed by the Assembly. The convention also passed 12 resolutions, 11 of those unanimously, which called for specific rights of women. The 9th resolution, however, declared it is the duty of women of this country to secure them to themselves their sacred right to the elective franchise, and that was the only one to meet opposition. For claiming that a woman had the right to vote, the entire Seneca Falls Convention was subject to public ridicule, leading to some backers to withdraw their support. The resolution, however, marked the beginning of the women's suffrage movement in America.
From her progressive upbringing, Stanton learned of the discriminatory laws under which women lived and determined to win equal rights for her sex during the Reconstruction era. Understanding the massive inequalities of women who have suffered during the 19th century, Stanton pushed for various reforms such as the Married Women's Properties Act of 1848, because upon marriage, a woman lost the right to control property that was hers prior to marriage, and nor did she have right to acquire any property during her marriage, and also the right to vote. She later worked with prominent suffragist Susan B. Anthony. In fact, she already observed enough about the legal relationship between men and women to insist that the word obey be dropped from ceremony. She is quoted to have said during her wedding, "I do, but I do not obey." And from her address on women's rights, she says, "The present social, civil, and religious condition of women is subject to vast to be brought within the limits of one short lecture. Suffice to say for the present that wherever we turn the history of women is sad and dear and dark without any elevating circumstances, nothing from which we can draw consolation. As the nations of the earth emerge from the state of barbarianism, the spirit of women gradually becomes wider, but not even under what is thought to be the full blaze of the sun of civilization is what God designed it to be." Anthony and Stanton increasingly tied women's suffrage and black suffrage together, forming the Women's Natural Loyal League in 1863 to support the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery and campaigning for full citizenship for blacks and women. 1868, she worked with Susan B. Anthony on The Revolution, a militant weekly paper with editorials often written by Stanton. The paper provided a strong counterpoint to the prejudice evident in other newspapers of the day, arguing for equal rights, suffrage, and equal pay. The two then formed the National Women's Suffrage Association, NWSA, in 1863. Stanton was the NWSA's first president, a position she held until 1890. At that time, the organization merged with another suffrage group to form the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Stanton served as the president of the new organization for 2 years. Since that time, she began writing the Women's Bible to interpret scripture from a feminist viewpoint because of the Bible's inherently sexist and misogynistic views about women, including the ideas of submission, subordination, and obedience, thus leading her to be recognized as one of the most radical feminists in the women's suffrage movement.